Frank Morrison had been living on the streets of Detroit for 3 years, surviving on handouts and sleeping in abandoned buildings with only his loyal companion Rusty, a scrappy mutt who had found Frank during his darkest days and never left his side. When Frank collapsed from a massive heart attack in an empty warehouse on a bitter January night, it seemed like another homeless tragedy that would go unnoticed until spring cleanup crews found his body. But Rusty had other plans. The determined dog broke away from his dying owner and ran 6 blocks through sub-zero temperatures to Detroit Medical Center, where he had learned that humans went when they needed help. For 4 hours, Rusty barked, scratched at doors, and refused to be driven away until a night shift nurse finally followed him back through the frozen streets to discover Frank, unconscious but still alive, setting in motion a rescue that would prove that the most loyal hearts often beat in the chests of those society has forgotten. Welcome to Saved by Tales. Before we dive into this powerful story of loyalty transcending homelessness and a dog's determination to save his human's life, tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed the incredible bond between homeless individuals and their animal companions? And if you believe these amazing stories of unconditional love and heroism deserve to be shared, hit that subscribe button and join our community celebrating the 4-legged heroes who see no difference between rich and poor when it comes to saving the lives they love. Frank Morrison's journey to homelessness had been swift and devastating. 3 years earlier, he had been a factory supervisor with a steady income, a small apartment, and plans for a modest retirement. But a combination of factory closure, mounting medical bills from his late wife's cancer treatment, and untreated depression had stripped away everything he had worked for over 20 years. At 58 years old, Frank found himself sleeping in shelters when space was available, and in abandoned buildings when it wasn't. Detroit's harsh winters made street survival particularly challenging, but Frank had learned which buildings offered the best protection from wind and snow, and where he could find occasional work to earn money for food. Rusty had appeared in Frank's life during his second winter on the streets, a skinny, mixed-breed dog who was as down on his luck as Frank himself. The dog had been hanging around a fast-food restaurant where Frank sometimes found discarded food, and when Frank offered him half of a sandwich, Rusty had followed him home to whatever shelter they could find that night. "You're probably better off without me, boy," Frank had told the dog initially. "I can barely feed myself, let alone a dog." But Rusty had made his own choice about their partnership. The dog provided warmth on cold nights, companionship during lonely days, and an early warning system when other street people or authorities approached their temporary shelters. Over the months that followed, Frank and Rusty developed a survival routine that kept them both alive through challenges that defeated many others living on Detroit's streets. Frank shared whatever food he could find or afford, while Rusty provided protection and emotional support that helped Frank maintain his will to survive. "Rusty's smarter than most people give him credit for," Frank would tell other homeless individuals they encountered. "He knows which buildings are safe, which people to avoid, and when trouble's coming before I do." The dog had learned the rhythms of street life quickly. He knew when soup kitchens opened, where police patrols were likely to move them along, and which areas of the city offered the best opportunities for Frank to find day labor or handouts. Most importantly, Rusty seemed to understand that Frank's health was fragile. The stress of homelessness, poor nutrition, and untreated medical conditions were taking their toll on Frank's body, and Rusty often displayed protective behaviors when Frank was feeling unwell. "That dog watches over Frank like a guardian angel," observed Sarah Chen, a social worker who regularly checked on Detroit's homeless population. "Their bond is incredible. Rusty won't leave Frank's side even when other dogs or food might tempt him away." Frank had been experiencing chest pains and shortness of breath for weeks, but had no access to medical care and no money for doctor visits. Like many homeless individuals, he ignored symptoms that would have sent housed people to emergency rooms immediately. "It's just the cold and stress," Frank told himself, unwilling to acknowledge that his body was sending serious warning signals about his cardiovascular health. On January 15th, Frank and Rusty had found shelter in an abandoned warehouse on Detroit's east side, a building that offered protection from the sub-zero temperatures and wind that made survival outdoors impossible. Frank had managed to gather enough materials to create a relatively warm sleeping area in a corner of the building where broken windows were covered and wind couldn't penetrate. Rusty curled up beside Frank as they settled in for the night, both of them grateful for the shelter and hoping the cold snap would break soon. Frank's chest pains had been worse that day, but he attributed them to the stress of finding adequate shelter and food in the brutal weather. At 2:30 a.m., Frank's heart attack began with crushing chest pain that woke him from sleep and left him gasping for breath. Frank's heart attack was massive and sudden, dropping him into unconsciousness within minutes as his cardiovascular system went into failure. In a hospital setting, immediate intervention might have saved his life quickly. In an abandoned warehouse with no phone, no neighbors, and no way to call for help, it seemed like a death sentence. Rusty woke immediately when Frank collapsed. Sensing the medical emergency, even before Frank fully understood what was happening to him. The dog's distressed whining and pawing at Frank brought no response. His human was unconscious and barely breathing. For most dogs, this would have been a moment of confusion and helplessness. But Rusty had observed human behavior closely during his time on the streets, and he had learned something crucial. When humans were sick or hurt, they went to the big building with bright lights where people in white clothes helped them. Rusty had been to Detroit Medical Center before with Frank when his owner had suffered a bad cut that needed stitches. The dog remembered the location, the smells, and the fact that humans went there when they needed help that couldn't be found anywhere else. Making a decision that would save Frank's life, Rusty left his unconscious owner and headed into the freezing night. Running through Detroit's empty streets at 3 a.m. in sub-zero temperatures, Rusty covered the 6 blocks between the warehouse and Detroit Medical Center with single-minded determination. The dog's paws were burning from contact with ice and salt on the sidewalks, and his breath formed clouds in the frigid air, but he never slowed down. Rusty knew exactly where he was going. His memory of previous trips to the hospital with Frank guided him through the city streets, past closed businesses and empty lots, toward the one place where he knew humans could help his dying owner. When Rusty reached the hospital emergency entrance, he began barking immediately, urgent, continuous barking that echoed off the concrete and glass surfaces of the medical center. The dog positioned himself directly in front of the automatic doors, refusing to move even when hospital security guards tried to shoo him away. "There's a dog out here that won't leave," security guard Marcus Johnson radioed to the front desk. "He keeps barking and trying to get into the emergency room." "Just chase him off," came the reply. "We can't have stray dogs disrupting hospital operations." But Rusty wouldn't be chased away. Every time security personnel approached him, he would back up slightly, then return to his position at the doors, continuing his urgent barking. For 4 hours, Rusty maintained his vigil at the hospital entrance, barking continuously despite efforts by security staff to remove him. The dog seemed to understand that time was critical, and his barking became increasingly frantic as the night wore on. "This isn't normal behavior for a stray dog," observed Lisa Martinez, a night shift nurse who was taking a break and watching Rusty's determined efforts to get attention. "Stray dogs usually avoid hospitals. This one seems like he's trying to tell us something." As dawn approached, Rusty's barking had attracted the attention of several hospital staff members who were beginning and ending their shifts. The dog's persistence and obvious distress were unlike anything they had seen from street animals. "What if he's trying to lead us somewhere?" suggested Dr. Robert Kim, an emergency room physician who had been watching Rusty through the window. "I've heard of dogs doing that when their owners are in trouble." Lisa Martinez made a decision that would save Frank's life. "I'm going to follow him," she announced. "If he's trying to tell us something, we need to listen." When Lisa Martinez stepped outside and approached Rusty, the dog's behavior changed immediately. His frantic barking stopped, and he began moving away from the hospital entrance, pausing to look back and ensure that the human was following him. "He definitely wants me to go somewhere," Lisa radioed to hospital security as she began following Rusty through the early morning streets. "I think his owner might be in trouble." Rusty led Lisa back through the same route he had taken hours earlier, moving quickly, but ensuring that she could keep up with his pace. The dog's navigation was precise and purposeful. He knew exactly where he was going and how to get there. "I'm following the dog toward the east side," Lisa reported as they covered the 6 blocks between the hospital and the warehouse district. "He's moving like he has a specific destination." When they reached the abandoned warehouse, Rusty immediately led Lisa to the corner where Frank lay unconscious and barely breathing. The dog's owner had been without medical attention for over 4 hours, and his condition was critical. Lisa Martinez's medical training kicked in immediately when she found Frank unconscious in the warehouse. She checked his pulse, assessed his breathing, and immediately radioed for emergency medical response. "I need an ambulance at the warehouse on Gratiot and Russell," Lisa reported. "I have an unconscious male, approximately 60 years old, possible cardiac event. The patient has been down for several hours." While waiting for the ambulance, Lisa began basic life support measures, checking Frank's airway and monitoring his vital signs. Frank was alive, but in critical condition, much longer without medical intervention, and he would not have survived. Rusty remained close to Frank throughout the rescue, never leaving his owner's side but allowing Lisa to provide medical care. The dog seemed to understand that help had finally arrived, but his vigilance never decreased. "This dog saved his owner's life," Lisa told the paramedics when they arrived. "He ran 6 blocks to the hospital and barked for 4 hours until someone followed him back here. Without that dog, we never would have found this man in time." Frank Morrison was rushed to Detroit Medical Center's cardiac unit, where emergency physicians confirmed that he had suffered a massive heart attack and would have died without immediate medical intervention. His survival was directly attributable to Rusty's actions in seeking help and guiding rescuers to their location. "Mr. Morrison was minutes away from death when we found him," explained Dr. Sarah Foster, the cardiologist who treated Frank. "His dog's decision to seek help at the hospital was extraordinary. Most people don't realize that dogs can understand medical facilities and their purpose." Frank regained consciousness after 2 days of intensive care, his first concern being the whereabouts of Rusty. Hospital staff had been caring for the dog in their break room, understanding that the bond between Frank and Rusty was crucial to both their recoveries. "Where's Rusty?" Frank asked weakly when he first woke up. "Is he okay? Did someone take care of him?" "Your dog is fine," Dr. Foster assured him. "He's been waiting right here for you to wake up. That dog saved your life, Mr. Morrison." The reunion between Frank and Rusty was emotional and powerful, witnessed by hospital staff who had come to understand the remarkable bond between the homeless man and his loyal companion. Rusty's joy at seeing Frank conscious and responsive was obvious to everyone in the room. "Rusty, you good boy," Frank whispered, tears streaming down his face as the dog gently nuzzled his hand. "You saved my life, didn't you? You brought help." The story of Rusty's heroic action had spread throughout the hospital, inspiring staff members and demonstrating the incredible loyalty and intelligence of dogs who are often overlooked because their owners don't have traditional homes. "This dog's actions were more sophisticated than many humans could manage," observed Dr. Kim. "He recognized a medical emergency, remembered where medical help could be found, navigated through the city at night, and persistently communicated until someone listened. It's remarkable." News of Rusty's heroic rescue spread beyond the hospital to the Detroit community and eventually gained national attention. The story of a homeless man's dog running through freezing streets to save his owner's life resonated with people across the country. Donations poured in to help Frank with his medical expenses and to provide temporary housing while he recovered from his heart attack. Local animal organizations offered to provide veterinary care for Rusty, and several housing assistance programs reached out to help Frank transition off the streets. "Frank and Rusty's story shows us that love and loyalty aren't determined by economic status," said Maria Rodriguez, director of Detroit's Homeless Services Coordination. "Their bond represents the best of what humans and animals can be for each other." The medical crisis that nearly killed Frank became the catalyst for positive changes in both his and Rusty's lives. Frank's heart attack qualified him for disability benefits and medical assistance that he hadn't known how to access while living on the streets. A local apartment complex, inspired by Rusty's story, offered Frank affordable housing that allowed him to keep his canine hero. For the first time in 3 years, Frank and Rusty had a permanent address, regular meals, and access to medical care. "I always thought being homeless was the worst thing that could happen to me," Frank reflected during his recovery. "But if I hadn't been on the streets, I never would have found Rusty. And if I hadn't had Rusty, I'd be dead right now." Frank and Rusty became advocates for homeless individuals and their animal companions, working with local organizations to highlight the importance of pets in the lives of people experiencing homelessness. "People don't understand that for many homeless individuals, their pets are their only family," Frank explained during community presentations. "Rusty didn't just save my life that night, he's been saving my life every day for 3 years just by being there." Their story helped change policies at local shelters and service organizations to become more accommodating to homeless individuals with pets, recognizing that separating people from their animal companions often prevented them from accessing needed services. 5 years after Rusty's life-saving run through Detroit's streets, Frank and Rusty continued their partnership in their small apartment, both healthier and more secure than they had been during their homeless years. Frank's heart condition was managed with medication and regular medical care, while Rusty enjoyed the comfort of regular meals, veterinary care, and a warm place to sleep every night. "Rusty taught me that heroism isn't about being famous or having special training," Frank said during an interview about their experience. "It's about never giving up on someone you love, even when the situation seems impossible." Their story continued to inspire people and demonstrate the incredible bonds that can exist between humans and animals, regardless of their circumstances or social status. "I still think about that frigid January night when a homeless man collapsed from a heart attack in an abandoned warehouse, and his scrappy mutt made a decision that would define loyalty forever. If Rusty had stayed with Frank, if he'd tried to comfort his dying owner, instead of seeking help, Frank Morrison would have become another nameless casualty of homelessness that society barely notices." Rusty's story teaches us something profound about the nature of family and devotion. This dog didn't have a fancy home or professional training, but he understood something that many humans miss, that love means action, especially when action is the only thing standing between life and death. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed the incredible bond between homeless individuals and their animal companions? Have you seen animals show loyalty and intelligence that transcended their circumstances? These partnerships between society's forgotten people and their faithful animals might teach us more about love than any mansion or pedigree ever could. Share your experiences in the comments below, because at Saved by Tales, we believe that the most loyal hearts often beat in the chests of those society overlooks, and their animal companions prove that heroism has nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with refusing to abandon those you love. If Rusty's incredible story moved you, if it reminded you that the greatest bonds are often forged in the hardest circumstances, please share this video with others who need to see what unconditional loyalty looks like when it runs 6 blocks through freezing streets to save a life. Hit that like button, subscribe to Saved by Tales, and help us continue telling the stories of animals whose love knows no social boundaries, and whose heroism proves that the most important families are often the ones that choose each other when the world has given up on them both. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes our greatest heroes are the ones who have nothing left to give except everything.